So, you just started using LinkedIn Premium. Now what? Well, on your premium company page, you noticed around 7.5 times more page engagement and 5 times more page views. Well done. And now, new clients are messaging you. All because you're using LinkedIn Premium, which helps you get the business growth you want. Think big, small business. Think big. Start your free trial at linkedin.com/premium small business. That's linkedin.com/premium small business.
All right, here we go.
New Phineas and Ferb is here.
We're back, baby.
For 104 more days
I know what we're gonna do today.
of summer vacation.
I am ready for summer shenanigans.
Let's do it. Oh, yeah.
All right. We're gonna bust Phineas and Ferb once and for all.
Are we gonna do this again?
New inventions, shenanigans, innators, adventures, and songs.
Brand new summer vacation.
New Phineas and Ferb starts June 5th on Disney Channel and next day on Disney Plus on disneyplus.disney.com.
Have you heard of Olivia, the travel company for lesbians and LGBTQ+ women? You know what they say. Life is short and the world is wide. And when you're a lesbian or LGBTQ+ woman, you want to be able to go on vacation, have some fun, and be yourself. Olivia Travel creates full takeovers of their cruise, resort, riverboat, and adventure vacations, so you can relax and be completely yourself. Olivia also provides the entertainment, bringing comedians and musicians from within our community. Traveling by yourself? No problem. Olivia has a robust solos program so you can travel independently, together. Single, coupled, or in a group, you'll meet amazing LGBTQ+ women who come from all walks of life yet have so much in common. Join the thousands of Olivians who travel to bucket list destinations all over the world. It's life-changing to be in the majority on your own vacation. Discover Olivia for yourself at olivia.com today. So I was thinking that you could start by introducing yourself and how you move through the world, which I know is how you start your podcast, which I love, or how you have people introduce themselves.
My name is Angela Denise Davis. I'm the creative director for the ZAMI NOBLA Podcast, and NOBLA stands for National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging. We've been doing the podcast for over 6 years now and have amassed a wealth of Black lesbian history. I am a person who believes in the gift of journey. And so as I think about my life and the things I've done and the experiences I've had a lot of journeys along the way. Probably one of the most significant was that in 2004, I became legally blind, and that totally redirected the way in which I moved in the world. And so it was just another one of those things that I add to the journey as a way of processing the many ways we can show up in the world. So I show up as a Black woman, a lesbian, a blind person, and someone who is committed to the gift of spirit and being informed by the way in which the Spirit encourages us to move.
Welcome back to Cruising, everyone. That was our guest this week, Angela Denise Davis. She's a creative director, podcast host, and ukulele instructor for ZAMI NOBLA, the leading advocacy organization dedicated to empowering Black lesbians over 40.
We focus on advocacy, community action, research, and opportunities for older Black lesbians to be in conversation with each other and outside of isolation, to really find what it means to be in community. We have done a lot of, which is unique for a nonprofit, a lot of this community action research around breast cancer, COVID, caregiving. We've amassed a wealth of data, and we have opportunities for music education through our community music program, which is centered around the ukulele. We also look at issues of creating affordable housing for older Black lesbians. And with that effort, we created the Biggers House, which is a residence for older Black lesbians. And we have 2 chapters, the North Carolina State chapter and the Georgia State chapter, that really help make it possible for older Black lesbians to be visible, to be in places where they can learn about advocacy and advocate for themselves in the community. In 2003, I started losing vision in my left eye. And it went from that to my having these burning sensation in my leg every 15 minutes. And I dealt with that for like a week. And then I had a neurologist that said, oh, well, I'll give you some Neurontin and you can take as much as you needed. Well, within a few days, I couldn't even drink water. For the next 8 weeks, this was from Thanksgiving to Christmas into the new year, 2004, I could not drink anything. I was in the hospital for a period of time, and I had to be fed intravenously just to stay alive. And so much was happening. I was still trying to keep my job. And by the end of that late January, I was reading an application for a student who was coming into the school, because at this time I still had vision in my right eye. And I was trying to do everything I could to keep that eye working, because I was still needing to work. I still needed insurance. I still needed a job. I needed to pay rent, car note, and all that stuff. And in late January of 2004, it was a day I was at work, and I told my assistant, I said, this office is getting darker. I need more lights. I'm going to go home because I'm just tired and I need more lights. And I was still able to drive at the time. The next day, when I got up, I discovered the room wasn't darker. I was losing more vision in my right eye. And within an hour, I was totally blind, no light perception, nothing. And I remember talking to my sisters as this was happening, and I said, okay, I know things are bad because I can't tell whether or not I have grapes in my refrigerator or if that's a bowl of salsa I put in there. And they came, as we were talking, they said, okay, we're getting ready. They came from Atlanta to Nashville, took me to Vanderbilt. And Vanderbilt said, you know, you're going to need some more treatment, blah, 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 blah. And so at that point, they said, just come back to Atlanta with us. And so I went back to Atlanta with them and stayed for 2 months. And I was having these bouts of optic neuritis. I had basically probably 6 or 7 bouts all in total over a matter of 6 to 8 months.
What is that? Optic neuritis?
Yes, is where your optic nerve, which connects your eye to your brain, is inflamed, and the myelin, the outer sheath of your nerve, it just starts getting eaten away. So I had no vision in my left eye because the optic nerve was basically dead. So I was holding on to the right eye, and at that point in time, it started to fail because of all these bouts of optic neuritis. And so by the middle part of the summer, I had had enough prednisone and enough treatments where we were able to kind of hold everything at bay, and the bouts of optic neuritis stopped. But at that point in time, I had lost a significant amount of vision and was determined to be legally blind. I couldn't drive anymore and really had to learn skill sets all over again. So it was an amazing experience. I would not wish anyone to have to go through a catastrophic health issue that I went through with this, because it was not just about my vision, it was about my health. A lot of other things happened in the midst of that. But it was something that changed my life and really reshaped my orientation in the world, how I moved in the world, and what I valued. So I see it as a part of life. I don't see it as my vision loss as making me deficient. It makes me different. And that's kind of the way in which I move with it.
What do you exactly mean by how much it has changed everything for you? Obviously, in a lot of logistical ways, but
well, you know, I say I wasn't a bad person before my vision loss,
but not as good.
But I was a young woman. I was 32. I had a great job. I had an apartment I loved. I had a great car. I was traveling a lot. The world was wonderful. Everything was fantastic. And then I discovered that with vision loss, it affects your economic world. It affects your vocational world. It affects your relational world, because a lot of times people will leave you. Friends don't know how to necessarily respond. And so some of those social groups you were in, you're no longer in because, you know, as the Stephen Sondheim song goes, sometimes people leave you halfway through the wood. You know, others will deceive you, you know.
Is that something that you experienced, losing people in your life?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was interesting to me because I'm now at the point where I'm not bitter about it because I think that life is busy for everyone. And truly, some people were just really busy. But what it reminds me of is when I see someone who's in crisis, to step back and say, you know what? Remember when you were in the hospital and it made a difference when someone came visit you? Go visit someone in the hospital. Remember when you were struggling with trying to find out what equipment you needed to read a book? Help somebody when they come to you. So now I have a lot of people who'll say, I know someone who's losing vision loss. Angela, can you talk to them? And I'm more than glad to do that. And I realize that some of those people, those friends who left me, left because they didn't know how to respond. They didn't know what to do. And then I had some folks who were quite religious who said, oh, well, God is doing this to you because God wants to toughen your ministry, to make you a better minister. And some people would say, well, the devil's doing it to you because the devil wants to stop you from being a minister. So, there were all these different dimensions to how people responded to my vision loss. And so I think, being away from that experience, for these past 20 years has really given me the perspective that folks don't always know what to do. And sometimes they do things because they are ignorant. And sometimes they do things because they just don't care. But that's their experience. And when you're in the midst of a crisis, what you're trying to do is to live your best experience and understand that people fill in the gap. Because for those people who didn't come, who I thought would have been there, I had some amazing people I did not even know. I remember a woman who heard about me and she took me to the store. I had a speaking engagement. She took me to the church where I was to speak. She would check on me. We would have lunch. Situations like that where people can step into your life and help you when other people, because of a myriad of reasons, cannot.
How long did it take you to have this kind of healthy attitude about it that you do now, where it's changed your life, not necessarily for the worse?
Yeah, one of the things I remember a neurologist saying, he said, and this was in the beginning, like the first few months, he said, well, you're awfully upbeat about this. And well, two things. I think I was in a state of shock and awe because I couldn't believe this was happening. And it was amazing to understand how the body worked. When I would have these heat swells every 15 minutes, my leg would burn in my right leg. I was amazed. What is that? How does it happen? I was amazed at this idea that the optic nerve connecting your eye to your brain can be, this connection that if you lose it, different things can happen, and how your vision changes. My central vision was affected, but I still could see some things peripherally. So there were those dimensions. But I think also I told people, I know what the bottom of my life felt like because I touched it. And I didn't want to stay there because I was afraid if I stayed in that place, I wouldn't get up again. So I was very gifted with my parents and my sisters and friends who were helpful, who, made it possible for me to do what I needed to do. And for those who stepped in, I did not even know who were helpful. So it really was a community event for me. And I think that's what made it possible. And I also tell people that whenever you have a catastrophic situation in your life, particularly if it leads to disability, the quickest you can get rehabilitation from that point of injury determines your success. I decided I wanted to go to the National Federation of the Blind, Blind Inc., Blind Incorporated in Minneapolis, and learn how to redevelop my life as a blind person. So I spent 10 months there, and I chose that place because I wanted to go someplace where there was snow. I'm from Kansas. I wanted to be in a place where I could say, if it snows, I know how to walk through snow. If it's icy, if it's hot, I wanted to get an experience that would be full. And at the NFB centers, these National Federation of the Blind, there are 3 in the country, one in Ruston, Louisiana, one in Colorado, and then the one in Minnesota. And so the training there is quite different from other blindness centers because you have to wear sleep shades. You have to be totally blind in how you move through the program because the methodology is that if you can learn to not depend upon any residual vision you may have, you're going to be better prepared for the world. So that training was great for me. It was also anxiety ridden because you get up in the morning, you put on your sleep shade and you walk to the center, you walk to the bus stop, and you kept that sleep shade on until it was a break time and lunchtime. You, with the help of someone, of course, you did power tools because there was a shop class that you did. You learned
Power
Braille.
tools even. That's
Yes.
amazing.
Yes, I made a
So
bed.
they covered everything.
I made a bed. You cooked with gas and electric stoves. You learned how to do Braille. You learned computing. You learned orientation and mobility. So for me, that was the experience that changed my life and totally reshaped the way I thought about blindness. And once I left there, I was ready for the world because I knew that it wasn't a deficiency. It was just a difference. It was a difference.
Just a new part of your identity.
Yes.
The rehabilitation center sounds amazing.
Oh, it was.
And so then, okay, was it easy to pick the ukulele back up, or was that something that was difficult?
I
to
never
really-
played the ukulele. What happened was in 2015, I was watching the Kennedy Center Honors, and it was the one where Rita Moreno and Cicely Tyson were honored. Part of the performers that evening was Yo-Yo Ma. And I was so moved by his playing. I got up from the bed and I went to the television because I wanted to see him as best as I could play because I was so moved by it. And when I looked at him, my face to the screen, I just saw his body and movement. And I had a flashback to when I was a little girl sitting in my parents' home playing the piano. And I felt the music. I felt the music sitting on that bench playing. It was a memory I've totally forgotten. And when I had that experience and I saw Yo-Yo Ma, something in me said, you've got to get back to music. You've got to get back to music. I played piano as a kid between 9 and 16, played the clarinet in the band. And so loved music, but as a blind person, I couldn't do it anymore. And then I searched the next day, easiest instrument to learn. I Googled it. And of course, what comes up? Ukulele. Hard to master, but easy to learn. And it's true. It's a very accessible instrument to get into, but mastering it takes years because it's an amazing instrument. So that was in 2016 when I first bought my ukulele, January, and started teaching myself. And then I loved it so much that in 2019, I started teaching. And we created the ukulele program, UKIN, the Ukulele Invitation. That's our community music education with ZAMI NOBLA. And most recently, I've gone back to learning the piano. And I do that with a gentleman named Mark Miller, who teaches students how to play the piano. And for his blind students, he does it over the phone. So it's been this circle back to that place of the piano and re-envisioning practice, re-envisioning what it means to think about music theory. Your fingers are your eyes. And if you allow yourself to just look at the ukulele and say, okay, I got to look at the frets, as opposed to feel it with your fingers, then you're missing a real opportunity to be in conversation with the instrument. So I sometimes tell students, and when we used to have classes in person, I would give them sleep shades and say, hey, put on the sleep shade and practice, and then get a sense of really what it means to be in tune with this instrument.
So what was it? You said you grew up in Kansas?
Yes.
What was that like for you, and sort of in relation to your queerness? Is that something that was a big part of growing up?
Kansas, Wichita in particular, I tell people it's probably a great place to be born and maybe a great place to die. But between those two fields, you need to do something else. There's a reason Dorothy left, Kansas. There's a reason she was looking for the Oz. So I knew that when I left high school, graduated from high school and went to Clark, that in Atlanta, I was freed. I mean, I had really a rough time. And I think part of that was because I knew I was different. I just didn't know what the difference was. I knew I wasn't like the other girls. I didn't have a lot of social engagement. I spent a lot of time around older adults, be that being the only kid at Bible study on Wednesday nights. Did a lot of public speaking.
As a younger person, you were doing public speaking?
Yes, yes.
Oh.
When I was probably 11 or 12, I started doing oratorical contests and different things like that that required a lot of speaking in the community and these competitions. And then at 18, I preached my first sermon, my trial sermon, accepted a call to ministry at 18. But like I said, I knew I was just different. I wasn't like the other girls. I didn't go shopping, but I couldn't put my finger on why I was different. And it wasn't until I went to college that I understood.
Did you know of queerness as a younger person? Was that something that was on your radar at all as far as what the community felt about that or what even that was?
There were spots. I remember hearing one of my aunts talk about this woman being a bulldagger. And that was a term, an old term, people use for lesbians. She's a bulldagger. And I didn't know, what does that mean? I remember one of my sisters had a friend who was gay and his mother kicked him out. This is when I was probably in my junior year of high school. So I saw things like that. And I said, oh my God, that's horrible. Why did his mother do that to him? It was just sad. But I did not identify myself as a lesbian. I could not understand that. There was it was all foggy, like I said, until I got to college. So it was a different experience growing up in Kansas. I wouldn't want to repeat it again. All of those things made me who I am, but gosh, nope, wouldn't do that over.
But when you say that, it's kind of about this sort of vague, foggy oppression, like not really being in touch with your identity.
Yeah, I think it's like someone who you're forced to wear a suit that doesn't fit.
Yeah.
And you don't know what you should wear, but this doesn't work. And I remember, and this is a part of it too, because my mother, I think, had a very different way of thinking about what I should wear as opposed to what I wanted to wear. And for one of my speaking engagements, I had this dress. I'll never forget. It was pink and it had lace. And neither one of those things I like. To me, I looked odd in it. I didn't like the way my hair was. I didn't like the way this lace was. I didn't like this dress. And I certainly didn't like the fact that it was pink. But I had no sense of being able to understand what would fit me better, what I liked. And I guess I thought, well, I should try to adapt to living in a world of pink and lace because that's what one should do, even though this feels odd. And so it took a number of years to realize that you don't have to wear pink lace because that's not who you are. And you need to find who you are, which is, I think, the gift of aging. I know so many women talk about, by the time they're 50, that there is a sense of being in the world that is undeniable. I mean, there's just some freedom, some joy. And so for me, as I look back upon those years, I just want to say, wow, I'm glad you made it through because, that was not who you were at all. But you really could not give shape to that. And that's the sad part. I wish I had had somebody who could give shape to it.
Yeah. Even just, this might sound silly, but even just being 28, I wouldn't want to go back in time a day because of how much better I know myself now. And that's just inherently so much more comfortable in existing. I'm curious if you recall when it first crossed your mind that you might be a lesbian or when that thought first occurred to you.
I think the fullness of it was shaped when I was in college and I was probably my second year. And there was this guy that I liked. I mean, he was a nice guy. He was cute. He was all that stuff. But I think I was going to tell him one day that, hey, I think I'm a lesbian. And something in me said, don't do that. I remember standing in the student union looking out onto what we call the yard. It's just the open kind of area in the campus. And I was going to tell him, I think I'm a lesbian. And I made that decision not to tell him or to tell anyone else. And I buried it for probably 9 to 10 years. And I didn't come out. It didn't resurface until I was like 29 or 30. I did a good job of burying because I was going to go into ministry. This was not godly. I'm feeling this way, but we need to bury this. And I took a shovel, dug deep, and put everything on top of it. There was another woman in my dormitory who was a lesbian. A couple of years later, who came out, and I just saw all of the hatred she received. She was this popular girl when she came out. It's like people were throwing darts at her. So I think I had enough information to know I was right to bury. I was wrong, but in my head, I was right to bury it because these things don't turn out well. It seemed to me.
What happened to that girl? What was going on? What are the darts that you mean?
It was sad because, like I said, she was very popular and she had pledged a popular sorority on the campus and was just the darling. And then when she came out, she was ostracized. People talked about her. She was much freer in herself because I remember she had cut her hair into a short natural and was just beautiful. A beautiful sister. And she didn't get any of the social kind of support that you would have thought she would have received just based upon how she had been treated previously in the relationship she had before coming out. So that was a sign to me that said, don't do that because that happened to her and it would happen to you as well.
What year was that around?
That was the early 1990s.
How did you eventually come to terms with these two conflicting career in theology and your sexuality?
I know what really helped me was going to Vanderbilt Divinity School, being in a place where you had access to premier theological education, understanding the reality of what it means to be a Christian and a thinking Christian, a minister and a thinking minister. I had never been in a place that supported all the different ways that we move in the world. And there was I. And then it just began to unravel all those things that I had buried. I think because of the flood of everything that I had learned, those waters were washing deep into that soil and things were rising. All of the things that were buried were rising. It's kind of like being in a low coastal place, and when it's flooded, the things you bury can rise to the top. And that was how it was. I was being flooded with new information, new relationships, new ways of being in the world. And it changed me, So I started thinking about the people that were my friends who were queer. I started reading more. And I remember there was a book, I think it's edited by Joan Nessel, The Butch Femme Reader. And this particular version of it has this delicious cover. The bottom part is pink, but there's a picture above with these two sets of legs. One with kind of like masculine trousers and Oxfords, and the other one like fishnets and heels. I mean, it was just a delicious cover that says The Butch Femme Reader. And I would check that out a lot at the library, but I would make sure I put books on top of it.
Other ones on top, yeah.
Because I worked at the library and I'm like, I don't think I want all these people I know what I see all the time to know what I'm reading. So it went from, those books to an opening up where I said, this is who you are. It just became apparent. Oh, this is who you are. This is who you are. I never looked back because I came out and then the next year I lost my vision.
Oh, wow.
And I went to a therapist whom I had been in conversation with the year earlier around, my being a lesbian and coming out and all that stuff. And then when I went back to her a year later being blind, she would ask me things that I thought were ridiculous. How's your love life? Well, I don't have a love life. I'm in my apartment all the time. And then she would say, well, you have to get outside of your four walls because you're not going to meet anybody in your apartment. So then it became important not just being out in the world as a lesbian, but being out in the world as a blind person and taking all those intersections I had in the world and moving forward. So it was this real thrust into a world with all these new differences. And I tease people, I said, I couldn't be blind and in the closet because I'd never find my way out. You really have to say, okay, I need to go forward. There's a world. And if I stay here, I won't find anything.
When you say you came out the year before, what did that look like for you? You just sort of started being a little more public about it?
I started talking to friends and colleagues because at this time, I just started working as an admissions director at the Divinity School. And I had a friend who introduced me to these two phenomenal Black lesbians who lived in DC. And I was going to visit the city for a conference, and I met them. And they became these, guardian angels who really just ushered me into this warm, loving space. And I know them to this day. And meeting other folks in Nashville who were queer, not a lot of other Black lesbians.
The two people that you said you met, they kind of introduced you to a larger Black lesbian community?
Well, because they were in DC, I met them before I became blind. And then after I became blind, it became even more precious, the way in which they just supported me and really, took me on as family. But I think what was so important about them was that they were models of seeing other Black lesbian in the world and being able to touch and feel, this is what a Black lesbian is, to have some context of what that was, because I didn't have that in Nashville. And I later understood that a lot of queer folks, and certainly Black lesbians in Nashville, have a lot of house parties. And I didn't know that. And I wasn't invited to that. I wasn't a part of that world. So I did not know of really any Black lesbians in the city, but certainly had a lot of connections with white lesbians at the university and being in conversation with folks there.
Have you heard of Olivia, the travel company for lesbians and LGBTQ plus women? You know what they say. Life is short and the world is wide. And when you're a lesbian or LGBTQ plus woman, you want to be able to go on vacation, have some fun, and be yourself. Olivia Travel creates full takeovers of their cruise, resort, riverboat, and adventure vacations, so you can relax and be completely yourself. Olivia also provides the entertainment, bringing comedians and musicians from within our community. Traveling by yourself? No problem. Olivia has a robust solos program so you can travel independently, together. Single, coupled, or in a group, you'll meet amazing LGBTQ plus women who come from all walks of life yet have so much in common. Join the thousands of Olivians who travel to bucket list destinations all over the world. It's life-changing to be in the majority on your own vacation. Discover Olivia for yourself at olivia.com today.
You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. If you've ever shopped online, and let's face it, who hasn't? Chances are you've bought something from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes things easier, and not just for shoppers. They make it easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. It gives you a leg up from day dot with hundreds of beautiful ready-to-go templates to express your brand style so you can get up and running fast. You can tackle your important tasks from inventory to payments to analytics and more, all in one place. You can also spread your brand's word with built-in marketing and email tools built for you to find and keep new customers. And remember that iconic purple Shop Pay button that's used by millions of businesses around the world? It's why Shopify has the best converting checkout on the planet. Your customers already know and love it. If you want to see less carts being abandoned, It's time for you to head over to Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. Shopify.com/realm.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Spotify.
ChatGPT Plus is free for college students through May. Here's the thing. You've got a lot to do between now and then. Studying for finals, writing papers, trying to keep your life on track, and ChatGPT can help with all of it. It can quiz you for your econ exam, make a study guide from your French notes, plan out your meals and study breaks. It can get really specific on how you like to learn. It can even help you come up with ways to stop procrastinating. So from now until summer break, take advantage of all the ways ChatGPT can make your life easier. Restrictions apply.
So ZAMI NOBLA, the National Organization of Black Lesbians on Aging, is kind of a derivative of another group that just went by ZAMI. ZAMI was founded in Atlanta in 1988 by Dr. Iris Rafi and focused on advocacy and resources for Black lesbians without an emphasis on aging. Then in the early 2000s, a ZAMI organizer named Marianne Adams noticed something. Everyone around her was getting older. Women were spending more time at home and less time out in the Atlanta LGBTQ scene. And so, in 2011, Marianne founded ZAMI NOBLA to cater to older Black lesbians and bring these women together. So when Angela uses just the term ZAMI or ZAMI, she's talking about the original Black lesbian group. And she'll use the full ZAMI NOBLA name in regards to the National Organization for Black Lesbians on Aging.
The 90s was when you had just a wealth of things going on with ZAMI and other queer organizations here in the city. And Iris Rafi was the person who was responsible for starting the organization. And you're correct. It came out of just a real need for understanding there needed to be something that really centered the lives of Black lesbians. Marianne tells the story of just the value of that organization when they would meet at Karis Books. And Karis Books is another landmark here in Atlanta. It's a feminist bookstore. And they would have these meetings at Karis, and ZAMI would invite women to come in. And it was a space to be in conversation, but it was well understood by some of those folks that, don't talk to me outside of this space because I don't want people to know I'm a lesbian. So there was a real need to gather, a real need for people to have that space.
So you're pronouncing it ZAMI for when it's just ZAMI?
Well, it's interesting. I'm from the Midwest, and so I think all my life it would have been pronounced ZAMI. But when in the South, I've noticed that a lot of people say ZAMI. And so sometimes I vacillate between the two, depending upon whether or not I'm trying to be a fake Southerner or my true Midwestern self. But it's ZAMI or ZAMI, however one chooses.
I know that ZAMI itself is an Audre Lorde reference, and I've heard Audre herself referenced so much in the podcast. Can you kind of explain the origin of the name and also talk a little bit about how and why Audre Lorde is so centered in your community?
So ZAMI is a character word that Audre Lorde says is from the place she's located in the world, is really a word that talks about women who come together to work and to live in love with each other. So it really represents for us the identity of being a lesbian, and certainly a Black lesbian in the world. And so you will see that used a lot with the Black lesbian organizations. That's what the reference to. And if people have not read her biomythography, ZAMI, A New Spelling of My Name, that's something I point to because it is a classic and it's a landmark. Audre Lorde was one of those incredible individuals in the world who really places a pin in the landscape of a particular history or her story in this regard. She really was the person that many people point to when you look at Black lesbian foremothers in literature and really using the pen as a way of being present in the world. She was quite prolific. She wrote books of poetry and essays. Sister Outsider is another classic that I point people to. And she was, for me, very responsible for helping me understand that I needed to, as Audre Lorde would say, keep all of my identities afloat. She talks about the fact that, oftentimes people will say, well, you need to push this aspect of you down or that aspect of you down. But the real struggle and journey in the world is, particularly if you're one who meet the world at many different intersections, is to hold all of those identities afloat. And so as I talk about being a blind, Black, lesbian person in the world, all of those things weigh equally. So whatever community I'm in, all of those have to be represented. And I really appreciate and understand the work of Audre Lorde as a way for me to push that forward and stand in ground with that.
I read that you met Marianne Adams 2008-ish. How did you come together?
So I was actually living in Minnesota in 2007. After I became visually impaired, I had to really reshape my life. And part of that was doing training in Minnesota. After the training, I said, I really need to be in community with other Black lesbians, and did some research and knew I was going to move back to Atlanta. And the name and organization that kept popping up was Marianne Adams and ZAMI. And at the time, ZAMI was the organization for premier lesbians of African descent. So in 2007, when I moved to Atlanta, I was still testing the waters. And then in 2008, I really had a chance to meet Marianne and just saw an incredible wealth of work that ZAMI had done. Met her more formally in 2009. She's also my partner. That's when we started dating in 2009.
She is?
She is my partner. Yes.
That has completely escaped me in all of my research. Okay. Well, so then we've got a love story to cover too.
We have a love story. Yes. Yeah. And
wait. Do you remember the first time that you met?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I do remember the first time we met. Like I said, I had written to her and told her that I had moved to Atlanta and I was looking forward to being part of a Black lesbian community. And she was very welcoming from the jump because there was a project I wanted to do, a writing project dealing with African-American lesbians of faith. She's, okay, well, I'll talk to the board about this. But in the meantime, there's a Black lesbian I want to introduce you to who's blind. And I'm like, wow, there's another blind Black lesbian in Atlanta? And so she made that introduction. And then a couple of weeks later, she said, and I thought about there's someone else. So I began to understand quickly that she was a connector. And then in 2009, I met her face to face at the Baird Rustin Audre Lorde MLK breakfast here in Atlanta. And we had a chance to actually finally meet for the first time after doing a lot of emails. But it really wasn't until later in September of that year where we met at a ZAMI scholarship brunch, because at the time, ZAMI was doing this incredible work of providing scholarships to LGBT students. And they were able, through Marianne's leadership, to raise over $250,000 in scholarships for LGBT students. So I met her at that brunch and really had an opportunity to, from that point on, get to know her. It took a lot of time, a few months after that point, to have an opportunity to talk to her, develop this relationship, which we are now in.
How did you? Who made the move? How did it get into romance?
Well, it was very interesting because she invited me to her home for the Barack Obama election watch party. And so that was the first time I was actually in her home. And then once the inauguration took place in January, I invited her to my sister's home where I was staying, and I had brunch with her and some of her friends. And at that point, I made it known to her, I'm interested in you. I'm, fascinated by you. I would love to be in a deeper conversation with you. And she kind of, shrugged it off, didn't think about it. And then I went to her home a couple of days later for a brunch, for the actual inauguration brunch. And she decided that despite the fact that I was younger than her and I was a Christian and a minister, that she would be willing to be in conversation with me and for us to start dating. So it was a real process of getting her to say yes, but I'm so glad she did. We've been together for almost 16 years now.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So is ministry something that was like not really compatible with her? Is that why you say that?
Marian is not a person who is involved in organized religion. However, she is deeply spiritual. And for me, that was the gold mine, is that she is so committed to spirit and faith and earth and being in community. So I found that to be extremely appealing because at my core, that's who I am too, someone who's committed to spirituality and community and finding ways for us to be together and thrive on this planet. So all those things were there for her, but she was not really interested in being with someone, certainly who was not just a Christian, but a minister on top of all of that. So
yeah,
I had to explain to her just, my theological presence in the world and how I moved in the world. And I think after we had some conversation about that, she felt agreeable to kind of venture off into that path with me.
that makes sense. Yeah. I think I would have to have the same process if I were to start dating a minister too. Around how old were both of you at the time that you were getting together?
So at the time, I was 38 and she was 54. So there's roughly a 15-year age difference between the two of us. So she hadn't done anything like that before and was really kind of concerned about that part. But we have journeyed together well over these few years and discovered that we have a shared path and a shared journey. And it's been a real gift.
And so can you describe sort of the landscape of your lives at the point where there's a need for this group?
Well, it's really interesting. At the time, she is a social worker, trained social worker, but worked in the area of public health research, and it really kind of shaped the work she did in a very particular way. And so it was interesting to her as she was really looking at the organization, the Women in ZAMI, and noticing that, they were all growing older, 54, then you're 60, and then you're 65. And you realize that within the LGBTQIA, the queer community, it is youth-centered. It is youth-centered. And
absolutely.
Yes. And oftentimes, older adults can get pushed to the side. And so Marian had the vision and the understanding that this certainly was the case with those of us who were older, but also looking at women and then looking at African Americans. I mean, all different ways in which your visibility really can be denied based upon who you are, even within a queer community. So I think she saw and understood, oh no, we need to be concerned about us because there's no one doing work for us and no one will do work for us but us. And so that's where the impetus came to create this organization and how will women really understand we are redefining what it means to be aging. A lot of times people have this death and dying model related to aging. Oh, I'm getting older and life is no longer what it needs to be. But, that's really a sad way of thinking about it because every day when you have the opportunity to get up, it is a remarkable experience. And for you to understand that aging is a gift and we need to learn new ways of doing it. We need to change our language around it. We need to change our thinking around it and see the investment that years have given us as opposed to thinking of aging as a detriment. So certainly we're into the aspect of making our lives more visible, but we're also looking at redefining what it means to be aging in the world.
I've been having this conversation with my mom a bit, she has made clear to me that she does not want me to share her age, but that's exactly the conversation that we're having because it just makes me so sad that is something that she carries with her at this point. It's a very difficult thing for some people.
One of the things we do is we ask the woman to say their name and then state their age. on the podcast. And I haven't always been very adamant about that, but I'm getting to be more and more so about that because someone will laugh and say, oh, I'm 74, but I don't like it, or I'm 80 and blah, blah, blah. But I think what it does is it allows people to understand, oh, this is what 74 looks like. Oh, this is what 50 looks like. Oh, this is what 60 looks like. And so when you hear these stories and you're engaging with these women, you have a sense of really what is possible in the world. Then you see, oh, okay, well, this is very different from the myth I had in my mind about what 80 could look like. Really championing the idea that aging doesn't have to be a death sentence. Just because you're 70 or 80 or 90, it doesn't mean that you don't have value. It is difficult. It is hard. People judge you and limit you based upon that. And you do have to constantly fight for your place in the world. So I understand your mom's hesitancy to do that. But at the same time, I think there's power in saying, wow, this is 74 and it looks great. I'm doing fine. I'm enjoying the world.
Can you talk a little bit more specifically about what it means to become less visible as you age? I feel like that's something you've referenced a few times. And I guess specifically for Black lesbians, like, what does that really look like?
I think it means you go into places and people don't recognize you're there.
Oh, wow.
And that can be physically, you in a store. It could be financially. People don't think you have the capital to either buy something or invest in something. It could be spiritually, where people don't think that, you are able to bear witness to something. It could be socially, where people think that your value is less. They see you as valueless as opposed to valueful. And so for me, it really is this understanding that you aren't seen. You aren't seen. You aren't considered. The older Black lesbian checkbox is not checked because you are not in their line of vision, so to speak.
It's sort of, this sounds so cruel, but it's like people are assuming you have nothing to offer them or something. And like that's kind of how we normally move through society without really thinking about it. And that's really what's going on.
Exactly. It's, and I'll tell you this, and this is related to my vision loss, but I think it's a great example. Marianne and I were at a dinner, and I was talking to a gentleman, and he didn't know I was legally blind until I asked him if he would describe to me what the dish was in front of him and if he would pass it to me. And I said, I'm legally blind. And so he did that. And then he was just amazed. And then he turned to my partner. So what is it like being her caregiver? And up until that point, he never assumed I was legally blind. He never had any assumption about my being incapable of taking care of myself. But when I announced to him, by asking him to assist me, that I was legally blind, he automatically went back to his old narrative of what blind people do. And so even before my partner answered, I quickly said, when she's turning over in the morning, I'm getting up and getting ready to get out the house to go to work. That's what caregiving for Angela looks like.
That's what she brings to the table.
Yeah, that's what she's sleeping while I get up and going to work, and she goes to work later, but I had to get up earlier because I had to catch the paratransit van. So it's that sense that you have so many old tapes and narratives and stereotypes of what it means to be a particular person in the world, whatever that person is or that identity is, that is placed upon you. And it can render you to be even a person who's considered to have no value or just not even visible in the room.
Yeah. Wow. How do you handle that? I'm assuming that you have to face that kind of constantly.
Well, it happens a lot. And sometimes when I'm with people, let's say I'm at the checkout line, someone will talk to the person with me and not me, even though I'm the one handing the card, handing the cash, making the transaction. And oftentimes that person will say, don't talk to me, talk to her. She's the one buying that. So it's not uncommon for my partner or my sister or people just to kind of shake their heads and say, okay, here we go again, because people make the assumption. So I'll tell people, you can't talk to me. I'm making this purchase. You can make conversation with me. One of my neighbors told our yard guy, I try to talk to her, but she's so mean because I waved her and she doesn't wave back. And the yard guy who knows me says, well, she's legally blind. She can't see you.
Yeah.
But the gentleman didn't know it. He didn't know it. And so it's things like that you have to determine, okay, is this a day where I want to educate somebody because they're asking a question, or is this just somebody who's really someone I don't have to give the time to because I know that this is not going to be a worthwhile experience. And so I think people navigate that all the time based upon many different ways you move in the world, how you're going to talk about being you and giving time to people and determining whether or not this is valuable to do so.
I would love to hear more about kind of the older Black lesbian experience and why this is so important to have a group that centers them, even though it's so clear that it is important, of course.
Well, I'm going to share something that happened recently. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, I was in Augusta, Georgia, and visiting the Lucy Craft Laney Museum of Black History. And if folks don't know, Lucy Craft Laney was this incredible educator during the early 1900s who started school for Black children in Augusta. And I can't say enough about just the amazing work that she did. And so there is her home in Augusta, which was turned into a museum, which is right across from the Lucy Craft Laney High School. It's a big high school now, but she started that educational institution, several years ago, and it still stands there in her gravesite, and an eternal flame is there. It's a very moving experience being there, but one of the things that was very pronounced and clear to me was the importance of how we shape our own narrative. When we went to the museum, the executive director there talked about Lucy Craft Haney as being the daughter of freed Blacks. Okay. And so I tell people she was the daughter of freed Blacks to listen to that language and to hear it. We then later, a few hours later, went to the Augusta Museum of History, where in the midst of this woman's just incredible work, you would think that there would be just a little bit more. There was just a small placard, and it said that Lucy Craft Haney was the daughter of former slaves. Now, for me, that was remarkable to see the difference between someone understanding what it meant to be a freed Black as opposed to a former slave, and the history of what it meant to work hard enough to earn the dollars to not just for yourself, but to for your wife, as her father did, and then to really educate your children. And it really was another one of those sparks that informed how, when you allow someone else to write your narrative, they choose the language, they choose the lens, they choose how that story is written. And so for me, just that small story about Lucy Craft Haney and how someone writes your story and the difference that it makes between the lens of someone who understands the importance of centering your lives and someone who just is putting, something small as a footnote in the book of history or herstory. So I'm very adamant about our being at the center of all that we do, be it research, be it the podcast, social engagement. It really is having the fortitude to center what is important to us and to share that with others.
What I love so much, or what has really struck me about the organization, is that it's so multifaceted, and like what you're doing with the podcast is so much about storytelling and documentation and like celebrating. And then there are also all of these other resources that you all focus on. I know you mentioned the Bigger's House Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Some of the sort of tangible resources that you're all working on and offering the community right now?
I would love to talk about the Bickers House. And the Bickers House is the childhood home of one of our board members, Dr. Edith Bickers. She grew up in there. It's a home that's in Southwest Atlanta, and it's a place that's not just created to be a space for an older Black lesbian or two women, but a space that has full community gardens in the backyard. We have like 3. It will be made available again for occupancy, with the understanding that this really is a place where community is a part of it, with those community gardens and having social opportunities around that, being able to get healthy eating out of the garden. So it's a wonderful opportunity because we realize that certainly across the country, we know housing is an issue. People having affordable, safe housing is a huge issue. And it is certainly an issue for populations like older folks and Black people and queer people. When you put all those together, you get older Black lesbians who need affordable, safe housing. And that's the joy of being able to do the renovation of the work we've done on the Bickers House, and just to see how we're looking at it becoming a home to two women or couple to be in that space.
I mean, it's so cool. I know I've used up much more of your time than I originally suggested. Is there anything from the podcast that you want to share that you've sort of learned from talking to people that you think our listeners would find interesting, and anything about the way people move through the world as Black lesbians over 40?
So one of the things that we are doing now is we have created a project called the Memory Worker Project. And that's an oral history project where we are training our ZAMI NOBLA members to conduct oral history interviews, because we realize that if we're going to be visible, we need to, as I say, make a receipt of our existence. And having these stories, these narratives as a part of our digital archive is going to really lend to that. I've seen that because the podcast, although it is not a quote unquote oral history, my style, the way in which I think about it, is in that vein of oral history, because I didn't hear anything like that. In 2017, when I went to my iTunes or Stitcher or any of those other places, I didn't hear an organization like ours that was out there. I didn't hear a podcast that was focused on older Black lesbians. I heard queer podcasts. I heard podcasts by women. I heard podcasts focused on older people, but I didn't hear the intersections. As I look back on these 6 years and these over 60 episodes we have, the most poignant thing that I think about is the importance of now and capturing the story now. We have one woman, Khalil Aisha Moon, who's no longer with us. She was a poet and a professor, and we had an opportunity to capture her story. And she was very gracious in her telling of her story and reading poetry to us. It was just beautiful. And she died a few years later. And so every time I listen to that podcast, I smile because I remember just the great time we had and how we said, we really need to get together. We need to do some things together after this, just because she was such a great spirit. And it was just wonderful having her as a part of the podcast. And she died. And then I thought about a couple of other women, Valerie Boyd, who was a professor and a writer here in Atlanta, an extraordinary woman, Shay Youngblood, who was a playwright and, a writer, and 2 women whom had talked to about, being a part of the podcast, and they're no longer here with us. Shay died this year, and Valerie Boyd died, I believe, last year. And so they both were agreeable to do it, and we just never got the time. So I think what the podcast tells me is now. Tell the story now. Record the story now. Share the story now, because tomorrow is not promised. And if you want to do it, you can't put off. You have to do it now.
Thank you to our sponsor, Olivia Travel, the travel company for lesbians and LGBTQ plus women. If you like this episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. It really helps others discover our podcast. Cruising is produced by a small but mighty team of 3 queer women, Rachel Karp, Jen McGinnity, and me, your host and editor, Sarah Gabrielli. Our theme song is by Joey Freeman. You can find us on social media at Cruising Pod and on the web at www.cruisingpod.com. Support us at buymeacoffee.com/cruisingpod.
I'm Amy Nicholson, the film critic for the LA Times.
And I'm Paul Scheer, an actor, writer, and director. You might know me from The League, Veep, or my non-eligible for Academy Award role in Twisters.
We love movies, and we come at them from different perspectives.
Yeah, like Amy thinks that, Joe Pesci was miscast in Goodfellas, and I don't.
He's too old. Let's not forget that Paul thinks that Dune 2 is overrated.
It is.
Anyway, despite this, we come together to host Unspooled, a podcast where we talk about good movies, critical hits,
fan favorites, must-sees, and in case you missed them.
We're talking Parasite to Home Alone.
From Grease to The Dark Knight.
We've done deep dives on popcorn flicks. We've talked about why Independence Day deserves a second look.
And we've talked about horror movies, some that you've never even heard of, like Ganja and Hess.
So if you love movies like we do, come along on our cinematic adventure.
Listen to Unspooled wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to hit the follow button.
Can you actually change your personality if you want to? How does peer pressure work, and why is it so powerful? Should you ever really trust your gut when you make a big decision? These are just a few of the topics we've recently covered on my podcast, Something You Should Know. I'm the host, Mike Carruthers, and each episode of Something You Should Know covers multiple topics that are likely relevant to you. You'll discover things you can use in your life today, right now, like how to have a great conversation, how to be more courageous, the anatomy of the perfect apology, and much, much more. To date, there are over 1,000 episodes of Something You Should Know, and we've gotten over 4,000 mostly 5-star reviews. I invite you to check out Something You Should Know. Look for the bright yellow light bulb on the blue background. Something You Should Know, wherever you listen to podcasts.